Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Voice of RIO today, and our guest is Don Moore. Don is an associate professor of Ohio University at the Southern Campus and also the director of electronic media. So we have a lot to learn today about what all that encompasses and where we are with some of the other projects that he has going on. Besides all of those things involved in being an associate professor and directing electronic media, he is also a published author. So we will be talking about that. So we have a lot of ground to cover in the next 30 minutes. We're really looking forward to it. And to start, Don, tell us a little bit about your connection with RIO. How do you know RIO, and what linkages do you have with us?
The way I know RIO is because a couple of my good friends were graduates from RIO. They played basketball here. Okay. One is Bob Leith. He is Mr. History. Yes. We have televised several shows at our campus that we have on the local cable system there. And when you're in Bob's class or you're watching his TV show, you're not just learning about history, you're living history. And so Bob, and then of course he played basketball here, and one of his counterparts on the basketball team was Steve Gilmore. And Steve was a coach back when I was in school in the Ashland school system in Ashland, Kentucky, and now he's superintendent of the school system there. So I hear them sharing a lot of stories about RIO Grande.
They do, and I've had the opportunity to meet Bob on several occasions, and he has been part of our group that selects our Athletic Hall of Fame inductees, and so it's been great to work with him. So I'm glad to see those connections and some great RIO people in both Bob and Steve. So thank you for that. I know that at the last show that we hosted, or that I was involved in with Voice of RIO, my guest was Bill Dingus, and I know you've worked with Bill and have a lot of respect and regard for him. Tell us a little bit about that relationship.
Well, with Bill Dingus, of course, Bill hired me at the Southern Campus 27 years ago, and it was great because I was working at a TV station, and I saw the ad in the paper and applied. I didn't know anybody at the campus or anything. They interviewed me, and he called me during the Thanksgiving break. And he said, I know we're getting ready to go into Thanksgiving holiday. He said, we would like to offer you the job, but I don't want you to give me a yes or no. I want you to think about it over the holiday and then call me on Monday. So I called him and accepted the position, and I started at OU on December 15th. And it was great. I worked for 10 days. Christmas break came up, and he looked at me and said, you don't have any equipment or anything. He said, why don't you go ahead and take off between Christmas and New Year's, and we won't count it against your vacation time. And I thought that's a great place to work.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
I worked, for 15 days, or actually 10 days, and I got a week off. And so, but it was the start of a great relationship. Dr. Dingus was a great mentor of mine, and he is a person that he always, had the attitude of can do. And he looked at me and he said, you're really good with young people. He said, your work with broadcasting is just tremendous. He said, we need to start a program. And I said, I'll do it under one condition. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, when I was at the University of Kentucky, I had great book knowledge, but I didn't have any hands-on experience. And in broadcasting, you really need the hands-on. And I said, and I don't think it should be just any hands-on. I said, we need equipment that's equivalent to what Channel 3 and Channel 13 have in the market, so our students can walk out of here and walk straight in to a job. And he got with the grant writer that we had on campus at the time. Next thing I know, we put in a $1.7 million facility, TV studio.
Wonderful.
And that started my career at the university.
Excellent. Well, that's wonderful to hear. And like you said, that hands-on experience and making sure that our students are working with the kind of equipment and in the situations that they will see when they're in their careers and in the workforce. So that's
at the time we had a transition of technology because computers were just starting to come onto the forefront, and we were going from tape-based editing over to what we call nonlinear editing. And we actually had it before the TV stations did, so our students were going up and kind of training some of the old timers at the TV stations.
That's really
so
neat.
That was rewarding.
Yeah, that is. So let's take a couple of steps back and talk about the electronic media field a little bit.
Okay.
And for our viewers, what that means, what it involves, and as we've been discussing before the show, how that has really changed over time and what the influences are that are making that change. So can you educate us a little bit about what all is involved there?
Okay, well, the electronic media field started out with radio and television, to be honest with you. When we started our program, that's what we are. But today we're content creators because a student today, for example, when I came out of college, if I were to produce a show that would air on WSAZ, WOWK, in Huntington Market, maybe 150,000 people might see that show if it was a really good show. Today, a student can take and they can produce one show, put it on the web, it go viral, and all of a sudden 1 million people or more will be able to see it.
Right.
So the technology's changed quite a bit. So we teach content creation instead of just shooting video or just doing audio. It's because whenever you produce a show today, it could end up on a 3x4 screen, it could end up on a computer screen,
Right.
it could end up on HD TV, or it could end up on your cell phone. So students have to know what area is it that I want it to air on. Maybe it's going to be the big screen. Well, your audio is going to be totally different for a big screen than it is on an iPhone.
Right.
If you're shooting on an iPhone, or for somebody to watch on an iPhone, you want more close-ups than wide shots, because wide shots you're not going to be able to see very much.
Right.
So it's really changed the dynamic and the way we do things.
And
But
it's a
the
moving
content
target.
delivery is big, and technology's changing so fast.
Right. Well, that's very interesting, and I think as you're talking about again that practical application for students and thinking about they have to learn not only what is going on now, and you help them in the program that you have, but also they have to be prepared to how do they acquire that knowledge and information as they're going along so that they can remain very effective in their careers and they can receive promotions and things like that because they are taking the initiative and being proactive. So I bet that's just that's built into what you do, I know, to teach them how to teach themselves going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And all the people that work in the industry, that's the first thing they'll tell you is the things that we learned when we were in school, we were able to apply later on in our discipline. I had a student that was working at WSAZ, for example, and he said it's a continuous learning process
Right.
because it's so ever-changing. But another thing that we really focus on too is discipline, because that's what employers are looking for. They're looking for discipline today as much as they're looking for the techniques. A lot of them can teach people how to punch buttons and how to turn cameras on and off, but if you have the discipline, that's what gets you the job.
Good, very good. Well, I think we may come back to electronic media and some of the work that you're doing in your program if we have some time toward the end of the show. But I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about your experience as an author. And as I mentioned to open the show, Don Moore is also, you'll see his name in lights because he is a published author, and I think that right now you can go on Amazon and have access to his new book, and we'll be able to get it on the shelves sooner than later. But the name of that book is You Can Get There From Here. Did I get that right? I don't want to switch the here and the there and all that. So You Can Get There From Here. And you want to talk a little bit about that and the subject of that book and kind of give us an introduction?
That's the passion that I have. 27 years at the university, and then myself growing up in Ashland, Kentucky, I was an underperformer. When I was in school, I focused more on probably sports than I probably should have. And then when I went to college, even there, I was more interested in, of course, I couldn't play basketball at the University of Kentucky, but I was involved with intramural sports and things. And then when I got out, then I really realized, when I got into the television industry, I wish I would have applied myself a little bit more. But a lot of times, and I wanted to go to the University of Kentucky, and then when I got to Lexington, I swore I'd never come back to this area, to Appalachia. And I always wanted to go to North Carolina, Charlotte area, or somewhere like that to get a job. And then when I got in the education field at Ohio University Southern, I realized that a lot of young people today, they think just because they're from Appalachia, they can't be successful. And there's a lot of successful stories out there of people from our area that have been very successful, not just successful within our own community, but nationally and internationally. And a good friend of mine called me one day and said, I want you to come over to my office. His name is David D. Carter. He was in the marketing, he had a advertising agency in the marketing industry, and he was getting ready to retire. And he said, I'm going to move to Sanibel Island in Florida, And I looked at him, and he had all this stuff in his office. I said, what are you going to do with all this? And he said, I don't know. Do you have an idea? And I said, yeah, give it to me. It tells a great story. So I put a museum on the 3rd floor of the Rife Center where I'm at, and it tells a story of a young man who grew up. His mother was a single parent. He grew up in Flatwoods, Kentucky. And he was just an average student in school, in high school. He had a teacher in high school that told him he wasn't college material. And I've got him sitting at his desk there in the museum looking up at 4 college degrees. He got a bachelor's degree from University of Kentucky, went to Ohio University, got a master's, got an MBA from Syracuse, and then got a specialized studies degree at Harvard. And when he was at Harvard, he found a math mistake in a case study they'd been using there for a year.
Wow.
And it was his math teacher in high school that told him that he wasn't college material. So young people, there's several things. Number one, just because we're from Appalachia doesn't mean we can't be successful. Number two, people might say things along our career path that might discourage us, but if you have the passion and the will, you can overcome those. And so we take the story from there.
Those are, and I want to talk about David Carter and the book a little bit more, but I think that it's so, I want to emphasize what you just said. That message of this fallacy that sometimes we find students that we work with and just individuals that we're in contact with that kind of buy into this fallacy that because of your place of origin or something about your background that there's a ceiling that comes along with that. And it's been so amazing as I've been visiting with people related to RIO, whether they're alums or friends, are connected to this institution in some way, that have gone on to do really great things and have changed the world, and from a global standpoint, regionally, in our own communities. So I'm really happy to hear that message from you, and also the idea that you can't take in what someone else says to you or about you and make that your identity. You have to find a way to look beyond that and to still work toward your goals. So I think those are really important things. I'm so pleased to hear that, and that's part of our conversation today.
When I was in grade school, for example, I had a teacher in grade school, my English and reading teacher. She almost pulled me off the basketball team because of my reading grades.
Wow.
And I looked back at her and I thought, boy, if she could just see me today.
Yeah.
Or my speech teacher that encouraged me to go from sports. He said, Don, there's coaches, they're a dime a dozen. He said, have you ever thought about broadcasting? And now I'm able to enjoy a career, but on the weekends we're out televising football games or basketball games, so I'm able to do that. But if they could see today, I've been very fortunate. I was an average student in high school as well, and I swore I'd never come back to this area, but I've been able to do it right here in Appalachia, right here. I grew up in Ashland, Kentucky. I joke with people. I let them know that, I live in Kentucky, I work in Ohio, and I shop in West Virginia and Huntington. So
you're not biased on anything there, right?
But I do bleed blue sometimes when it comes to basketball.
Understand that. I have degrees from 4 SEC schools.
Well, there you go.
Not
okay.
One of them is Kentucky, but
that's okay. SEC, we're good.
Yeah, that's right. The president there, Eli Capilouto, is a friend of mine, and so I really have a soft spot for Kentucky too. So, no, I appreciate you saying all those things, and that idea of these humble beginnings and how that relates to your book and to the subject of your book, David Carter. Can you talk a little bit about it, because we're all going to want to read this book, but can you talk a little bit with us about some of the highlights of the book, or some things that just kind of stand out and really resonated with you as you were writing it? I
think one of the things is a lot of times we will have ideas and we never act upon them. And David Carter acted upon his ideas. Now, when he was younger in school, in college and things, he said one day he was sitting in class and he looked over and here's Amy sitting there with a 4.0 GPA, and here's Billy with a 4.0 GPA, and here's Bobby, whose dad owns a Mercedes dealership in Lexington. And he said, how in the world can a kid from Flatwoods, Kentucky compete with this? And he said it was just the little things, He said you take a commercial, you look at it, you write it, and then when you get back to your dorm, and then you look at it again, you write it again, and look at it maybe one more time, rewrite it, and then turn it in. He said by the time it's over with, you've got more experience than the others because you've written four more commercials than they have.
Yeah.
But it's simple things like that. He was watching TV one night, and Johnny Carson was on. Johnny's writers were on strike, and Johnny says, I'm drowning here. I need material. I need some help. Somebody send me something. So he called his photographer and said, hey, Richard, come on over. They wrote a script. The next morning they shot it. They sent it out to L.A., and by the time it was over with, they had 12 different skits that aired on Johnny Carson.
Wow.
Johnny was recognized by the Academy Awards for one of his anniversary shows that had all the top things that he had done over the years. And in that particular show, 2 of Dave Carter's skits ended up.
How neat.
He was at an awards presentation one time, and at this awards presentation, he noticed him and a group of other guys that were there, noticed that everybody winning the awards were either from New York or LA. And he said, there's a lot of good media people in between in Cincinnati, Chicago, Houston, Huntington, West Virginia. And so they said, there needs to be another awards program for regional people. And he went out and started it and became one of the greatest awards programs for the media industry that there is, and it's called the Telly Awards, and he was the founder of that.
Wow, some great
Simple
accomplishments.
things like that, yeah.
And talk about, seizing the opportunities when they come along.
Yeah.
Listening for them, being attuned to those.
Yeah.
And that's, I come from a really small community in Mississippi. That's where I grew up. And, people around here, we talk about the smallness of RIO. Well, the area, Longview, Mississippi, where I spent most of my childhood, smaller than RIO, smaller than this village. And you think about the people that I knew and that I grew up with, and the things something about the spirit of determination and kind of analyzing and taking stock of situations, and then the hard work and the discipline and the ethics and the hard work ethic that goes along with that. There seems to be a really interesting combination there.
There is, and I think as you read through Dave Carter's story, there's example after example. I mean, to become known as well as he traveled all over the world, speaking at seminars. Several Asian major companies in Asian countries hired him to come over do consulting for him. So he was not only known nationally but also internationally. And usually to become known internationally, you had to be on Madison Avenue in New York. He didn't do it on Madison Avenue in New York. He did it all from Carter Avenue in Ashland, Kentucky. And so, again, the story, you can get there from here. He did it all from Ashland. He went to school in our area. He's kept his business, raised his kid in our area. So
that's great. It's a wonderful story. One of the things in reading a little bit about the book, not having read the book yet, but reading a little bit about the contents, it seems like there was a theme there with Mr. Carter that was baseball related, that he did a lot of things related to baseball documentaries and his own interest in the game. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I sure can. The reason why I can, because that was my life, was baseball, and that's kind of one thing that drew me toward Dave. Dave got involved in baseball. He played in high school, never made it to the pros, but he was able to position himself in the business world where he helped form the first New York Yankee fantasy camp. And for people that don't know what fantasy camps are, that's where old people like me will pay $5,000 to $10,000 to go to Florida and go out on the field with, Cincinnati Reds or New York Yankees, and you get your own Red uniform or your own Yankee uniform. And Dave did this and formed the first camp, and it was called the Mickey Mantle Whitey Ford Fantasy Camp. And so Dave got to play baseball with some of the greatest players ever in those 3 years that he ran this camp. He was also very active with the Negro League Museum, trying to help get that formed. He did a lot of baseball cards for the old timers. They didn't have a lot of money. One interesting story, Whitey Ford, one of the great New York Yankees, was in Columbus, Ohio, and he called Dave one day and he said, Dave, where exactly are you? And Dave said, I'm about 2 hours. And he said, can I drive down and see you? So he came down to Dave's house, and they were sitting on the porch, and he said, we didn't make the kind of money these guys make. When we played baseball, he said, I'd just like to have enough money to get my wife a new car. That's all I'd like. And Dave said, oh, really? So Dave grabbed his lemonade and said, let me go refill your lemonade. They went inside, and while he's inside, he picked up the phone and called a local car dealership, and he said, how would you like to have the New York Yankee Whitey Ford as your spokesperson. And within 20 minutes, they worked out a deal. He went back out and he said, "You want to go down and pick out that new car for your wife now?"
Wow.
And so they did a 2-year lease on a vehicle. He did all the ads for that, but it was simple things like that.
That's really neat.
There's a couple other stories about Ted Williams,
Okay.
his meeting with Ted Williams in the book, and so real interesting stories.
Cliffhangers to get us
Yeah.
to go out and get this book and read it, because it sounds really interesting.
Another neat thing about the book, too, is the way we set it up is, I tell Dave's story. We interviewed about 39 people that were involved in Dave's life. But at the end of each chapter, or even sometimes in the middle of the chapter, Dave would come in and give a footnote and say, "Take a look at what I did as a Boy Scout, and here's how I applied that to my career later on. You can do the
neat.
same."
Oh, yeah.
So
A real good message
it's
there.
got a little teaching segment at the end of each chapter too.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, that's you definitely got us interested in what else is in this book, and it just sounds like a heartwarming and really inspiring kind of story from someone who, again, had those humble beginnings but accomplished so many things.
Right.
And so I think it's a good lesson for us all. Let's turn the tables. And when I say turn the tables, it's making me think about you a little bit, because I know that with your electronic media experience and your work in television, that you have spent a lot of time on the other side of this table, right?
That's correct.
And this is a little different when you come on this side, and you're great. You're a pro at doing this because you've seen it done so many times. But for our viewers and people who may be listening on Blog Talk Radio, are there some things that you would talk about in your career, kind of being on the production side of things, and just what that was like, and what that's been for you throughout your career?
I think the biggest part of my career, well, being able to build, I was on the ground floor of 2 TV stations, so I got to build them from the ground up, and so I got to see all the inner workings, and even though I wasn't an engineer, I could work right along beside them because I helped pull the cables and everything.
Yeah.
So if you're a young person out there and you have an opportunity like that, volunteer, get involved, and that's what it's all about. Another great thing about this career is I'm able to help the community. We do a lot of work for nonprofit agencies, doing videos for nonprofit agencies. That's real rewarding too, to see them, to be able to show a tape that tells the story of United Way or something like that,
Oh, yeah.
and to see the donations come in. To see young people being in education, to see young people not knowing anything about broadcasting, and then a few years later you're sitting watching WSAZ and the 6 o'clock news is being produced or directed by Chris Peel, one of my former students, or another former student is the chief photographer there, another former student does this there.
That's great. That's great.
So that's real rewarding. Another rewarding thing is you get to meet so many interesting people, like yourself, an SEC foe. Yeah, there you
right,
go.
right.
But
That's what I am now. Yeah.
but I spent 18 days in Japan,
Okay.
working on a documentary about Japanese war brides.
Ah.
Young ladies that met U.S. servicemen, fell in love, and moved to the United States right after World War II. Their families didn't approve of the wedding.
Right.
The husband's families didn't approve of them marrying the enemy, and the government was strongly against it. They did everything they could, but it's such a tremendous love story. And that was based upon a book by a colleague of mine, Dr. Mickey Crawford, whose mother was a Japanese war bride. And we found out a group of these ladies were going to Japan to go back home, and so we followed them back home and got their story. And it's a part of American history that really hasn't been told.
Yeah, that's neat. So many journeys through your work.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of being behind the camera and seeing how these stories evolve, and how they can be told. That's really powerful. Really
I've done everything from operations to National Funeral Home Directors, educational tapes. But you learn so much in this type of a career.
Right. Well, I've learned a great deal today about electronic media, about your own experience, and an introduction for me to David Carter. So I'll look forward to learning more about that, and I hope our viewers will too. one thing I wanted to end on, it's something that on this show we really try to give people an opportunity to talk about their professional and their personal interests, but also to talk a little bit about who they are and their family and things like that. And we were talking a little bit before, and I was really inspired by the story about your wife and her work to go back to school, even later in life, and to pursue dreams and goals. And talk a little bit about that, because I could tell the twinkle in your eye. You're really proud of her, and you're proud of your daughter and the work that she's done too. So tell us a little bit about that.
I'm very proud of my wife. One thing I didn't share, she was the first person in her family to go back to college.
Excellent.
So she did that late in life. So that was another challenge, being a non-traditional student going back. And she didn't just stop with her bachelor's degree. She went on and got a master's degree and became a licensed professional counselor. She is actually licensed in 3 states. But another thing that I was very proud of is she is actually an ordained minister. And she used to go and travel all over the country speaking and singing. And for a female, that was very hard to get into and to be accepted. And it was her will and desire and motivation that got her, but that's what encouraged me to do the things that I've been able to do. So yes, I'm very, very proud of her.
Wow, you all are inspirational all the way around. That is excellent. Thank you for sharing that story, and I wish you guys all the best. And with as you share the book and other things that you're going to do, I know that your work is not done in this life, and we hope that you will be able to come back and visit with us and give us some updates as you take on new projects, and things of interest are there, because we'd love to continue to follow you there. With the audience that we have and the things we've talked about, are there any last minute things you'd like to share? Because I know we're going to be ushered off the air here soon, but maybe we can get in some last thoughts that you may have.
Just very quickly, no matter what stage you're at in your life, you can get there from here. Don't give up on your dream.
That's excellent. What a wonderful way to end this show. And I think from start to finish, thinking about for our students here at RIO, for students at other institutions, whether you're at OU Southern or you're at an institution across the globe, there's a common interest among students to be pursuing something and to be going towards goals. And so I love the way you put that, and how you have woven that into not only this book and the subject of the book, but also in your work. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we hope to see you next week. There's an entire slate of shows that will be going on next week. We will have the Area Council on Aging that will be represented here on the Business Talk show. And also you'll get a little bit of a taste of the Tattoo Museum in Mike Thompson's show. And then Richard Sachs, our provost at RIO, will be hosting a show as well. I'm not sure who his guest is yet, so you'll have to tune in. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.